This is Radio TV Phono Nut, and here we have an Arvin electric transistor AM radio from the mid-60s. These are pretty common. This one's a dual speaker model. They made a version with a clock in it. I dug this out. Let's fire it up and see what happens. Well, I'm hearing a little something from the speaker. It's trying to do something, but...
Alright, well, thank you so much, Dave.
I think this tuning condenser is very, very dirty.
The rule, though, is that we're not required to convince other people that are...
First thing I do when I come home is kick your doggone dog. Rookie, what happened?
Tell to live through. What we care about is living high enough. We have never made so much money in all of our lives. We're rolling in the pork fat, and you left rolling the bacon. What?
Amazingly, the volume pod is in decent shape, but the tuner is very erratic. Alright, let's open it up and see what we've got to work with. As you can see, this appears to be a transition set when they were moving from tubes to solid state. This one has the old style tube back and interlock. Here are the insides, dual speakers, nice ferrite rod antenna. I believe this is a 5-transistor chassis. It's one of these sets with a high voltage audio output stage and a dropping resistor to give lower B+ voltage for the front end stages. Hot chassis, of course, no power transformer. I was looking at this earlier, and that little gray electrolytic capacitor on the left-hand side of your screen is kind of puffy, so that'll get replaced. Heck, I might just replace all the capacitors just to make some of you capacitor changers happy. Here's the chassis. I left the speakers in the cabinet. If I need to hook them up later, I'll just use clip leads. I have the ferrite rod antenna just temporarily bolted here to the chassis because there are 4 wires coming off of here, and those wires are very fragile, and then we don't want this moving around any more than possible during the servicing procedures because the wires might break. Alright, here are the 4 single section electrolytic capacitors we removed. We'll check those in a minute just for fun. Now, the other day on one of the Facebook groups, and they might be watching this video, I don't know, they wanted to know how you tell what section of one of these multi-section can capacitors is which. Well, I'll tell you, if you'll look on this capacitor, I know it's hard to see, but let's see if we can get it to come in here. Oh, that's worse than ever. That's a little better. Alright, look at this row here. As you can see, there's a square. It says 100 microfarad, 150 volt. If you look under that, you'll see a triangle, and I believe that says 70 microfarad, 50 volt. And then it says can common, which means the can is the common negative terminal for both capacitors. Now let's look under the bottom here. If you'll look here, you'll notice by this terminal there's a square etched next to it and also a square cutout that would correspond to the 100 microfarad section noted on the can. And on this side there is a triangle cutout as well as a triangle etched by the terminal. Well, that would designate the 70 microfarad section. Now on some capacitors, the sections will be designated by a letter, as in this may be A, 100 microfarad, this may be B, 70 microfarad, this may be C, the common negative for both capacitors. Well, these types of capacitors are not widely available anymore, and if you can find them, they're expensive. So what we'll do is replace them with 2 modern single-section capacitors. Okay, here's our two replacements, a 100 microfarad 250 volt. That will work fine for the 100 microfarad 150 volt since the working voltage is greater than the original. And a 68 microfarad 63 volt. That will work for the 70 microfarad 50 volt. In today's world, it's often hard to get the exact value, as in 70 microfarad, 40 microfarad, 30 microfarads. You just have to go with whatever you can find that's closest to it. 47 or 39 are the two closest things to 40, and 47 is the closest thing to 50. And usually the small microfarad difference won't make any difference whatsoever in the circuit, so no worries there. Another thing you'll have to worry about, not so much worry about, but make sure you take note of it, is our ground terminal. When the can capacitor was in there, the metal can jumped this terminal, and this terminal. Well, this terminal here doesn't appear to be connected to anything, but this terminal here and this terminal here need to be grounded. So whenever we install the new capacitors, we need to jump this terminal and this terminal, either with a piece of wire or the excess lead from our capacitor or whatever. We just can't put a negative cap terminal here and a negative cap terminal here and not jump them out. The radio won't work right if you do that. And looking at how our cap was oriented on the board, we know this hole here corresponds to the 100 microfarad positive terminal, and this hole here corresponds to the 68 microfarad capacitor positive terminal. Now, if you think you're going to have a problem remembering how the capacitor was oriented on the board, just take a Sharpie and make a mark on the capacitor and on the board, so that way you can keep up with it. Oh yes, one other thing, and on modern capacitors, the negative terminal is always indicated by a band on the side of the capacitor with a negative sign within the band. And generally the negative lead is the shortest, but always go by the band with the negative terminal. You don't want to put a capacitor in, electrolytic capacitor in backwards. The results could be disastrous. Now, on older capacitors, you never know. This one has the negative end marked with a negative sign. This Elna cap that's puffy has the negative terminal marked with a negative sign, but some of these capacitors have the positive terminal marked with a plus sign, so you always want to make sure, absolutely sure, whenever you're replacing these older capacitors, which terminal is which. Okay, we have all of the electrolytic capacitors replaced and neatly installed. And here's our negative jumper under the circuit board. Okay, this is how our power supply works. This is our negative side of the AC line, which is switched to ground. Positive side connects to the anode of the diode. Cathode of the diode connects to this one end of the 300 ohm fusible resistor. That comes down here to the 100 microfarad, 150 volt section of the cap. Back up here to this other big resistor, this 8.2K resistor, which by the way checks perfectly fine. That resistor drops the voltage down to a lower level and goes to the 68 microfarad section of the filter capacitor to power the front end stages of this radio. Okay, it's another day and we're back on the Arvin. I've cleaned and lubricated the tuning condenser, and the way I like to clean and straighten slightly bent plates is just spray some contact cleaner in the plates here. You don't have to go crazy with it, just a little bit, and then rub a heavy-duty, thick piece of paper or cardboard or whatever that you can get in here. Just wedge it down between each plate, and that'll usually straighten them out and get any crud that might be between the plates that could cause shorting. Now, just for fun, let's test these capacitors that come out of here. Here's 50 microfarad Elna capacitor number 1, and it's measuring 0.096, so it's basically dried out. No surprise there. That wasn't a very good brand of capacitor. And ELNA 50 microfarad capacitor number 2, reading 0.131 microfarad, also dried out. I'm really surprised the radio played as well as it did without squealing and carrying on. So, yeah. And it might have squealed and carried on had the tuning capacitor not been so intermittent. Our 200 microfarad clocking in at 424 microfarad, so that one's way higher than it should be. They usually do that when they get old and just before failing altogether, so that's why we replace them. Here's a 10 microfarad, and this one's the only thing that checks anywhere close to what it should be, 12.8. And when I mentioned earlier about capacitor polarity and how the newer capacitors are always marked with the negative terminal, well, here's an example. Here's an example of an older capacitor that has the positive terminal marked. So, like I said before, you want to pay attention when replacing these old things. And here's our CAN electrolytic, 130 microfarad for the 100 microfarad section. I mean, that's not too terribly far off. At least it's not reading more than double like the other one did. And the 70 microfarad reads 102. I'm not going to throw this capacitor away. I'm just going to throw it in my junk box, and we'll possibly use it in a resurrection video. And there's going to be one of those coming up in the not too distant future. For those of you who do not know what a resurrection video is, it's where we take an old set that's beat to heck, trashed out, maxed out, one that's cosmetically not feasible to look at, and certainly not feasible to try to overhaul it, and we'll do just as little as we have to the chassis using whatever junk parts we have on hand without any regards to neatness or professionalism in the installation of said parts to get the radio to play somewhat decently. Radio, record player, TV, or whatever. And on such resurrections, we don't want to use our brand new parts that we actually have money tied up in. We want to use the old ones that we can scrounge up here, there, and yonder that, well, they may not still be within tolerance, but they'll still function. So, you know, we can put those in such sets and make them play again and not be out any money. Because after the resurrection, chances are they're going to get unresurrected and go into the parts heap. And this disc cap, 0.01 at, I believe, 1.5 kV, was the across the AC line cap. I replaced that with a safety cap. This cap is still perfectly fine. I just changed it anyway. On occasion I've seen these blow up and short, but I believe that's usually due to lightning strikes. This 0.047 400 volt Goodall cap is connected between, or was connected between, the tuning capacitor frame and circuit ground, so I replaced that, even though this cap is still perfectly fine. I know the more caps you see me changing something, the more toasty and warm and fuzzy you feel. So I just went ahead and replaced it with a modern Panasonic film cap just to make you feel good all over. And if anybody can tell me who made these transistors, I'd appreciate it. I know I'm supposed to know, but I'm drawing a blank. These are all germanium transistors except for the audio output, which is a Motorola silicon device, but everything else is germanium. It has a big black bold S at the top of the transistor, and below the trademark is the part number for the transistor. And I'm just drawing a blank as to who made these, so if anybody knows, let me know. I'd appreciate it. And as you can see, there's the output device and all of its blurry glory. Let's try that again. Okay, that's a little bit better. But yeah, as you can see, that's a Motorola device. It has the Batwing logo on it, or at least it looks like it does anyway. But yeah, this is a USA-made set with a mixture of Japanese and USA-made parts. So, and I replaced the silicon diode too. The other one was good, but they also have a tendency to short when they get to be 50-plus years old. So, went ahead and replaced it with a modern one, a Sylvania part. Okay, moment of truth. Is it going to play or not play or smoke or whatever? I bet it'll play.
We break camp. What do you got for me on that?
People need. There's so many things out there that the devil will give them. They'll give them everything that they could possibly get their hands on. That's not.
On double. TV is better than cable TV. Here.
Turn this soldering iron off.
Get there a little bit earlier, as you said, make their way into the ballpark.
I'm at Harlan.
All right, that's good. No intermittent cutting out of the tuning condenser now.
Labor Day Blues Festival.
You know, I fix these old radios up, and then I tune across the dial, and I ask myself, why do I even bother with this? Because I tune across the AM band, and there's not a darn thing on there that I care to listen to. Every once in a while, this station will play something from the old R&B era, but I don't want to listen to all the modern Southern soul music to get to it, and the station's so poorly engineered, it sounds like crap.
And there's not anything you can do to make him stop loving you, and he is the God of second chances, third, fourth, fifth, sixth chances. Some of us, we say we're really hard-headed, you know, and you need...
There's the religious station, although I have nothing against that station, but I don't want to listen to that all the time.
The guy has done a lot of good things.
Sports talk, don't give a flip about that.
Matthew Boyd, these are all the names.
WMOX, they've been around since 1946. They were a top 40 station up until 78. Country from 78 up until about 89. Then from 89 to 94 was the gradual shift to talk, and that's been it for them. 910, another talk station. All right, here we are, all back in the cabinet, ready to put the back on. Better get it off of that. That'll get me a copyright strike, even as lousy as it sounds.
Feeling weather will gradually trend back toward a summer feel as the weekend draws closer. Tonight, though, will still be clear but unseasonably cool. Our overnight low temperature will be 61 degrees. Your Thursday is still going to be sunny. The humidity will still be low, but we're starting to warm up. We'll make it up to about 88 degrees for our afternoon high temperature. I'm Storm Team 11 Chief Meteorologist Stephen Bowers for WMER 93.1 FM and 1390 AM Good News Gospel Radio.
Hey everybody, this is Ernie Haas of Signature Sound, and you're listening to WMER Radio 93.1 FM and 1390 AM, your hometown good news gospel radio in Meridian, Mississippi.
We need to be brave, we need to be bold, we can't stop until the world is told, though we might get weak, our God
team by... And Jim Dolan tried to help because he's a former alcoholic. She's not the worst human being on the face of the earth.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. Not until I impeach this president.
He is essentially unindicted co-conspirator. He's been identified as individual one.
Freedom is back in style. Welcome to the revolution.
Yeah, we're coming. Your city. Don't play our guitars and sing you a come.
And that's about it. So you can see what, let me just say, you can hear what AM consists of around here.
All right, the President Stalin a dour boss or what?
Pretty much what it consists of most everywhere else, too.
With the weapons in eye, keep the sword and the spear.
One of the analysts, and then he will.
The strongest stock.
As far as performance, I'd say this works about as well as it ever worked. Little 5-transistor chassis with no RF amp stage, so I'm really not expecting any out-of-town reception. But it works well for
and we've done it under this
local stations.
Terrible, phony cloud, that's all it was. And they should be ashamed of themselves, absolutely ashamed. And you know who knew it was a phony cloud more than anyone else? Was Schiff and Nadler and Schumer and Pelosi, every one of them. They all knew it was phony stuff. And you look at the polls. The polls are showing it maybe more than anybody else or anything else. And I've had my best polls.
The Clipper stand. Nobody thought this was possible.
My thoughts are it allows players.
All right, there you go. All cleaned up, working like new.